For better or worse, Amazon is flooded with a plethora of off-brand options that are tempting due to how cheap they can be. But is the trade-off worth it? Lower quality for a cheaper price? Well, in this instance, it seems you aren't losing out on much quality at all. For $30, an amazing price for a competent and well-built airbrush, the Master G233 is absolutely worth your money. Whether you are an absolute beginner looking to buy his first airbrush, or more of an intermediate painter simply looking for another tool for detailing or top coating, this is an airbrush I would highly recommend to those who can't afford the more premium options. In this channel, I primarily 3D print nerdy stuff to paint and make tutorials surrounding the hobby, so if that interests you, consider subscribing. Thanks. Alright, let's take a look at what you'll receive when ordering this airbrush. Links will be in the description as Amazon affiliate links, which help the channel when purchased. The Master Performance G233 is a dual-action gravity-fed airbrush. The biggest benefit of this particular airbrush is the fact it comes with 3 different needle sizes, making it incredibly versatile. A 0.5mm, a 0.3mm, and a 2mm. As you can see, the needles include their own individual air caps that must be used with their corresponding sizes. The 0.3mm is installed in the airbrush upon arrival, but in this video I will show you how to replace it. I'll be swapping it with the 0.2mm as I want to use this airbrush for fine detail. Also included in the box is a male quick disconnect adapter. You'll get a wrench for the nozzle tip and a pipette. Holding the airbrush, it feels nice in the hand and has a good weight to it. The inside of the cup is polished well enough and the size will hold an adequate amount of paint. Since I plan on using this for detailing, I'll never need to fill this more than a small amount. Instructions and whatnot are also included. The trigger feels responsive, though I would recommend adding some airbrush lubricant later on down the line. You can set how far the trigger pulls back with the needle preset control knob at the end here, which is quite useful for beginners to ensure you don't accidentally overspray by pulling back too much. Okay, disassembly time. We'll start off by twisting off the cutaway rear handle. Next, unscrew the needle chuck. This piece clamps down on the needle and holds it in position within the assembly, so loosening it just a bit will free the needle. You can then gently remove the needle and set it aside. Remember, this is the 0.3mm needle. I'll tighten the chuck back on so I don't lose it, and you'll then unscrew the entire spring assembly by unscrewing here. It takes a bit as it's deep in there, and depending on how deep it is determines the tension of the trigger. The assembly here consists of 3 parts: the actual guide we were unscrewing, a spring inside, and the needle housing where the needle slides into. With this out, the trigger pops right out, as what was holding it down was the needle passing through it. Next, remove the air cap. The air cap has a needle guard that can be screwed off, but I gave up after struggling for a second and I will take it off here in a bit. Now we'll remove the nozzle, which requires the use of the included wrench. You want to be very gentle when handling this piece. The metal it's made out of is rather soft and it's very easy to shear the threads. It's also tiny, so very easy to lose. And that's pretty much as far as you'll ever need to go. The air assembly can be taken off, but there's really no need to ever do so. Now that we have everything disassembled, we're going to reassemble it with the 0.2mm nozzle, air cap, and needle. Again, be careful with these pieces since they're small and easy to lose. I'm going to take the needle guard off the 0.3mm air cap off camera since it was stuck on there pretty well. It's not necessary for the function of the airbrush, it just protects the exposed tip of the needle. I'll place the 0.3mm nozzle and air cap back in this container and mark down that it's now the 0.3 and not the 0.2mm so I remember later on. I'll do the same for the needle, swapping the 2 out and marking it on the sticker. Alright, let's reassemble. Starting off, gently screw in the nozzle. It might be hard to catch the threads, just take your time, and once it's hand tightened, use the wrench to apply a very small amount of torque to fully tighten it. I'm using just a single finger's worth of force. Next, screw on the air cap. The front is good, now we'll move on to the middle. The trigger can be annoying to get in since the end likes to bend into the sides of the airbrush, but we need it to go straight down into the air assembly. You'll know it's seated properly when you can press it down and it clicks like normal. Next, insert the spring assembly with this trigger piece facing up. You'll have to angle it a certain way to get it to slide in. Once you screw in the spring assembly all the way and the trigger is properly seated, go ahead and screw on the needle chuck a couple turns in just so it stays on but not tight, as the needle needs to be able to pass into it. Now, we'll insert the 0.2mm needle, being very careful not to bend the tip. This is a very fragile part, and even the slightest kink in the tip will ruin the brush's ability to spray properly. Insert it firmly. If you feel something blocking it, stop and pull it out. But first, check to see if it's actually blocked or you're feeling some friction, which is normal. It might be hard to see on camera, but the tip of the needle is past the trigger and can be seen at the bottom of this cup, so I know the friction I'm feeling is normal. Go ahead and push the needle until it's completely in. And once all the way in, tighten the chuck, twist the rear handle back on, and you're done. Now, I'm no expert when it comes to airbrush manufacturing, so I can't really comment on the quality of the metal or build construction in comparison to a more premium option, but what I can comment on is how well it works. One thing you'll need to be cognizant of, especially if you plan on using the finer needles, is the degree to which you thin your paints as well as your PSI. It can be quite finicky to get this to spray smoothly without the needle clogging up from dried up paint on the tip. Using flow improver and perhaps a thinner with retarder additive will help with this. There's a fine line between being thin enough where it sprays smoothly and too thin where the paint is like water and not applying correctly. Again, this is mostly a concern for the smaller needles, as the larger one is more forgiving as it can handle spraying thicker paint. This is something you'll need to develop an intuitive feel for more than anything in regards to how thin your paint should be and how high your air pressure should also be. And as if including 3 needle sizes wasn't enough value for the price, they include a quick disconnect adapter as well. This is just a quality of life piece they really didn't need to include, but it's awesome they did. Instead of needing to twist the airbrush off the hose, you simply release the adapter by pulling down on this part here, and the airbrush pops right off. It also has an air pressure regulator valve that could come in handy if your compressor's PSI valve is too far away or you're just constantly needing to change the pressure for whatever reason. The quick disconnect can also be used with other adapters, as you can see here with my Patriot airbrush and a different quick disconnect adapter I have on it. As for this final piece, I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's a coupler meant to be used with an open air hose. Feel free to correct me in the comments. So, my final thoughts on this airbrush. This is an airbrush I've actually owned for a couple years now, and in that time, I've found it to work very well as a detailing airbrush, meaning it's my secondary airbrush. If this is going to be a primary airbrush for you, it still works really well as you can swap between the varying sizes. 0.5mm for wider spray applications such as priming, base coats, and top coats, and the 0.3 and 0.2mm for more detailed work such as shading or highlighting. It might be a pain to have to swap between the different needles every time, which is why most people own multiple airbrushes that serve different purposes, but if you can't afford it, this airbrush will work perfectly well. Simply put, if you are a beginner, this is the best and cheapest airbrush on the market. I would not recommend going any cheaper than this, and I would also not recommend getting something only slightly more expensive, like in the $60 or $70 range. Build up your experience with this, save up your money, and get something that is more premium, which will be past the $100 range. And that's the review, everyone. I hope this video was useful. If it was, please like the video, comment your thoughts on airbrushes and ones you'd recommend. Check out the Amazon links in the description and consider subscribing to the channel for more hobby painting and 3D printing content. Until next time, take care.